Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another video with Investor Insight. We're going to touch on what to expect in the week ahead. And I have 4 stocks that I'm going to be watching to see how they react to some key trend lines and see if we can make some potential trades off of them. So this is going to be a shortened week. There's only 4 trading days this week since it is Labor Day right now. So we only have Tuesday to Friday and it is jam-packed with Fed speakers this week. So we do have Jay Powell speaking on Thursday, and we have a few other Fed speakers speaking intermittently between Wednesday to Friday. So I do expect some volatility in what they say. And we'll see if they continue their hawkish stance, if they kind of revert back to more of a bullish stance. We'll see what they have to say, but I do expect a good bit of volatility this week. Now, also leading into the trading week, we've seen some geopolitical tensions flare up overseas. We've also seen oil catch a nice reaction off of the news. So Russia actually put a slowdown or a hold on a pipeline that affects oil and gas, and so we're starting to see ticks back up in oil and gas currently. So if we just look at the crude chart real quick, you can see at the current moment oil and gas is up 2.16% leading into market open. So we do have the potential for this to be a double bottom, but if we do break through it, then we can definitely continue lower as we are in a consistent downtrend at the current moment. So there is some flare-ups with geopolitical tensions, oil and gas situations that we need to take into account going into the market this week. Now, with that being said, futures are still holding nicely. They're up 0.3 at the current moment. Once again, we have all the way until market open tomorrow to figure out what happens there, but they are up at the current moment. So let's go ahead, let's jump into where's the market at, what can we expect, and then touch on those 4 stocks that I touched on previously. So first and foremost, SPY is still in this big old pennant. You can see it's holding its downtrend line. It's holding its support at the current moment. You can see that we have bounced off of this multiple times, and we are holding true to that support again now. So if we can get a bounce on the market, I think there's potential for us to move back to the 404 to 407 area. Now, could it very well go higher? Sure. And if it does, we'll keep a nice eye on the 411 mark. If we can get through that, we'll keep a nice eye on the gap fill up here. But I do expect that we get some type of decent reversal bounce, whether it's this week or next week. I do think there is a reversal in the cards. Now, with that being said, just because it's holding this support line currently doesn't mean it has to hold there. So if it does decide to break down, we do have a gap to fill to the downside around that 380 to 378 mark. So the question really becomes, are we going to get something that looks more so like a move down and then a move back up and then a move down? Are we going to be able to hold here, bounce back up, and then come down to fill our gap? What happens? But please remember that 80% of gaps do fill. So at some point, I do expect this to come back and fill. Now, my longer term projection on SPY is still new lows for the market, okay? And actually a move back to pre-COVID highs around the 339 level, just as an FYI. But shorter term, we are still holding this support. And once again, if we can bounce, keep an eye on 407, 411, 419, 421. If we do break down, keep an eye on 380, but then I do anticipate a bounce over the next week or two on SPY. So at the current moment, I'm not holding anything through the weekend. I held some Boeing, I held some TZA, I held some a few other stocks last week, but I actually am holding nothing at the current moment. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Qs, and the Qs are doing something very similar, but you can see they've officially broken their trend line. We bounced, we rejected right here, and now we have a gap to fill at 287. So I wouldn't be surprised to actually see the Qs show weakness this week in comparison to SPY. to come down, fill its gap, and then determine where are we going from there. Do we just continue lower? Do we bounce, retest, figure out what our next direction is? Or what truly happens from there? But once again, we've seen relentless sell pressure. Relentless sell pressure. And we saw a very similar thing back in March. And I think we're around this zone here, where we get some type of one more move down, bounce back, consolidation, and then our next commencing to the downside. So that's what I'm expecting with the Qs, but once again, we'll keep an eye on them. They are holding this previous support right here, so if it can hold that and bounce back, then great. There's potential back to 313, potential back to 306 as well. Those would be the trend lines that I'm keeping my eye on. If not, we have a gap to fill at 287. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the 4 stocks that I am watching for this week. The first one is Deere. Okay, the first one is Deere. Now, Deere at the current moment, you can see they have seen a lot of overhead resistance off of this zone, and we came back, tested that beautifully, and failed, and now we have rejected and started to move down. With that being said, we have broken a key uptrend, and at this point, if we zoom in, you can see we are getting those lower lows and lower highs. Okay, we are getting consistent lower lows and lower highs. Now, obviously, could we reverse back and come to fill this gap and then continue down from there? Sure. I don't know what happens, but what I can tell you is with my trading system, we are looking for a 921 EMA crossover where the blue line crosses the orange line, and that confirms the downtrend has started. And honestly, if we are looking back at where price action has gone in the past, I would not be surprised to see a move back to the 283 level or even the 280 level, and then figure out, can we continue lower? And if we do, we have gaps to fill down, 160, 194, 230s, but I would expect that we at least get a move back down to test the prior lows, at least the 283 level. So I think this is a potential for a swing trade over the next few months. This will take some time, but it is a potential trade and one I'm watching this week to see what plays out, see if we can get that crossover. But us rejecting at prior highs and prior supply does indicate, hey, this probably sees more downside over the next few weeks than upside. The next one we're going to touch on is Dick's Sporting Goods. Now, this is in a beautiful bull flag. So we got a big flagpole. We're getting a bull flag now. And normally bull flags break to the upside and they look like this. They normally consolidate and then break to the upside. Now, one thing I use in my trading systems is I use the 921 EMAs. So the 9 is the blue line, 21 is the orange line. As long as these are holding, the uptrend remains intact. So as long as these remain to support price, we have potential for another leg up that could put us back to the 120 level, put us back to the 115 level, and even if we can get through that, we have a gap to fill to the upside around the 138 level. So with that being said, this is a stock I am watching into this week as it is bull flagging nicely, and if the market sees a bounce, this is going to be a very, very top watch for me, given the fact there is a nice bull flag and the market's been reacting and pulling back, but Dick's has not. Dick's is holding very strong uptrend at the current moment. So Dick's is one I'm watching this week. Looks very strong, looks very good. So we'll keep an eye on that going into this week, especially if the market bounces. The next one we're going to touch on is SBUX. SBUX. This looks very similar to Deere. Okay, very similar to Deere. Uptrend has been broken. We came back, we retested it, we failed. We put in a bearish engulfing, and we are continuing to break down with a gap to fill to the downside around the 78 level. Now, like I mentioned, gaps don't always have to fill, but 80% of them do. So with that being said, this gap will act as a magnet for price to come down, test that zone, and then figure out, Can we bounce? Do we just blow through it? What happens there? But these are like magnets. Price normally gets vacuumed into them to test volume out of that zone. So at the current moment, you can see Starbucks is putting in a very similar type of trend. You're getting lower highs and you're getting lower lows. So with that, the downtrend remains intact. Now, if this trend line continues to hold, we might see a bounce back to, 84, 85, and then continuing down from there. But another thing that I watch fairly often is that 921 EMA crossover that I've mentioned many times so far. And you can see we have confirmed that crossover at this point, and you can see there is that crossover here. There was a crossover here, further commencing, crossover here led to further commencing, crossover here led to further commencing. So you can see these are normally respected by the market. So with that being said, if there is continued weakness in the market, Starbucks is one I will be watching to the downside for at least a play to 78.50, and that's about a 5% move down. The last one I want to touch on is coin. Okay, is coin. So coin currently is putting in a falling wedge. If we can get a breakout above 68.76, that sets us up for the potential of a move back to around 72. If we can get through that, we have potential for the gap fill above there around 78 to 81. Now you can see these are just taken from prior high candles. So there is the potential there. If this does break down, we don't have much support until around 52 and then back to previous lows around 46. So this is what I'm watching. I do expect Bitcoin to make a big move this week in some direction. And I think coin gets some type of bounce or breakdown off of that, depending on which way Bitcoin goes. So if we just take a quick look at the Bitcoin chart, Bitcoin is consolidating really nicely right now. All right. Last time we talked, if you hang out in the stream, we've been talking about this bear flag that has broken. Okay, we had a rise in support and we had a bear flag that's broken, and it has just continued down from here. So with that being said, if Bitcoin can continue to break down, we should see new lows that break under 19,520. And this just remains in a solid downtrend. As you can see, the 9 EMA is walking price down. If we can continue to hold this level and we can get back above prior highs and close above 20,280, I think there's potential for a move back to the 21,000 mark. And then coin obviously can get a bid off of that and potentially break its falling wedge and move from there. So those are the 4 stocks that I'm really watching at the current moment. Now I did want to give you an update, okay? Shopify was one we touched on last week, and it is right back down to its support. So this is one I'm watching as another play. This was a carryover from last week, so it's not anything new, but it has come down to test that 2183 level. If we do break down from there, we don't have much support until back down to around 28.28, and from there we don't see much support until about $17. So this is one I'll be watching. It is in a consolidation. We'll see which way it breaks. Can it bounce for the 5th time, or does it break down once again? We'll find out going forward, but that is another stock that I'm watching. That is a carryover from last week, and same thing as CrowdStrike. This was a carryover from last week that I'll just mention. We talked about this consolidation, and you can see CrowdStrike has officially broken down at this point. So everything about this still remains down. We don't have much demand until around 147 to 124. So that's one I'll be watching to the downside as well. And there is a gap to fill around $88 on CrowdStrike. If you're a long-term investor, keep a close eye on that range there. But we are breaking down. So that's just 2 updates from the last stocks that we touched on. And here are 4 new stocks that I will be watching going into this week. Be careful out there. It is going to be a volatile week with the FOMC meeting, or at least, the Jay Powell talk on Thursday and other members speaking this week. But the market is at a really make or break type of point. If we can bounce, keep a close eye on Dick's coin. Those are probably my two upside favorite plays right now, and potentially Shopify. If we do break down, then obviously Shop to the downside, Deer to the downside, Starbucks to the downside. Those come into play because they're already showing relative weakness. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.